Okay, in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to rig this simple mesh character, attach the rig to the skeleton, test it using some IK handles, and then scale it so it's in the right size to import into MotionBuilder. So the viewports have been set up so that we've got orthographic viewport. So we've got the front view here looking along the Z-axis and this side view here looking along the X-axis, and this allows us to place our hierarchy, our skeletal hierarchy in the character accurately. And so we start off, we've got the various tools here. So here's the joint tool, there's the tool to smooth bind the skin to the rig. So select the joint tool and then starting from the top, place our joints. So that would be the upper left joint, and down here we'll place the joint here, and we can move across to the side window and still place our joint to finish off that hierarchy and press enter to finish. And then if we need to make some adjustments, obviously that's going to select the entire hierarchy, because this joint here is the top of the hierarchy. If I want to move, for instance, that joint there a little bit back into the heel, I can do that by doing that and then selecting that one to lift that up and so on. And that looks about right, maybe a bit more back there. And as I select the joint at the end there, then it will move and stretch, and then press enter to finish. Now you'll notice the character in this view is sort of in the middle of the origin here in the Z-axis, and that's important because we're able now to use a facility to mirror this joint across to the right leg. Obviously we're looking at the face of the character here, although you can't see it, so this is the character is facing us as we're looking at the screen, so this would be the character's right leg. So by selecting that joint there and then going to skeleton, mirror joints, and it's already set for the YZ axis. That's the joint it's going to mirror around. So the YZ axis is the joint we need. You'll soon know if you've got it wrong because the joint will just disappear or will end up underneath the character and so on. So if I click mirror, and there we have our mirrored joint. So that saved us the work for putting in the bone structure for the right leg. Now we're going to continue on and putting the spine joints. We'll start with the first joint here, which is the most important joint really, because this will be the hip joint. This is the top of the entire hierarchy once we make all the connections, and then we'll have a middle back joint, an upper back, a neck, and a head joint. Now that's more than the base requirements for MotionBuilder, but it's useful to have these additional joints, especially in the neck, because that allows us to enable the character to turn its head more easily. If we didn't have the neck joint, then doing it from this joint, rotating it from this joint, then we'd be kind of distorting the upper body. And again, we can look at the side view, that doesn't look too bad, and make any adjustments. Now for the next process, we need to open the window, which is the general editor window that called the hypergraph, and we'll see the hierarchy here. There's our mesh, so we need to zoom back, select so we can see all of it. If I select the entire lot, I can frame it like that. So I haven't named any of the joints yet, I'll come back to that. So that joint there is the upper left leg, and that joint there, sorry, that's the upper left leg, and that joint there is the upper right leg. And then this joint here, I'm selecting, although I'm selecting the top joint, because I started here, this is the top of the hierarchy, so that's the hips. So I'm going to rename that joint now, hips. And then I'm going to rename that joint there, which is the upper left leg. So up left leg. And then this one, up right leg. and that will line up with the naming scheme in MotionBuilder, which also is important. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the hips there, I'm going to drag, what I'm doing now is I'm clicking the middle mouse button or wheel, and I'm going to drag it and make it a child of the hips. And you see Maya then puts that extra bone in there between the hip bone and the upper right leg, and the same thing for the upper left leg. And there we are. We have our skeletal structure there, right down from the head down through to the legs. But if I select the hips, the entire structure will be selected, because the hips is the top of the hierarchy. So now we can go on and create our joints for, I'll just move that one out of the way, for our arms and hand. And so we select the hip joint again, select the joint tool again, and we start again at the top of the hierarchy by placing a joint here, here, one there for the left arm, and finally the hand. Press enter. Now that needs a bit of maneuvering, so if I zoom up and just track down, move that up there, just stretch that out a bit, move it down, and then again move that one down there. But this time we need to look at the top view. So I'm going to change from the panel and look down at the orthographic rather, and I want the top view. And you see the arm is way out of the arm, skeleton is way out of the arm, as you'd expect. So I'm going to select that joint and move it back there. And probably this one wants moving back slightly as well. Move it across to there, and then this one move down to there, and then finally I can grab the hand and bring it to there. Go back to the front view, zoom back a bit, just track the view up, and we're going to do the same thing now with that arm structure, just that one wants a little bit more, that's better. We're going to mirror this across the ZX axis, and so skeleton, mirror joints. Now I know I've selected the right one, so I should be able to just mirror it like that. Then we go back to our hierarchy. These are the extra joints we've just put in. We've got our, that's the hierarchy for our left arm, so I'm going to rename that upper left arm. Up left arm. Oops. Okay, rename this upper right arm. And there we are. So now I've got these two arm hierarchies in place. I'm going to parent them to this joint here, which will kind of give me what would ostensibly be the collarbone. So that's the joint there. So it's joint 11, which is the upper back. There's that one. And there's that one. There we are. So we've got our hierarchy complete now. We've got our legs and our arms, and we've got the neck and the head. We'll just have a look in the top view to make sure that that arm, left and arm hierarchy is looking okay. Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, again, if I select the hips, I can select the entire system. We go back to our orthographic view, the front. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to rename all these joints as they should be. So I've renamed all the joints. The next thing to do is to bind the rig hierarchy to the mesh. To do that, I select the hips, I shift select the mesh, and then using this icon it will bind the rig to the mesh, and the mesh changes colour to indicate that that has taken place. Once the rig is bound to the mesh, the next thing we can do is to check that the mesh will work with the rig, so that we move the rig and the mesh moves accordingly. And the way to do that is to put on an inverse kinematic handle, a so-called IK handle. So we need to click that icon there, and in the viewport, this side viewport, we need to select the joint at the top and the joint at the bottom, and we get this IK handle now on the character, and I'm just moving the character's foot up and down. This is where we need to probably go into a perspective viewport and do some shading, and there we are. So I can move the characters moving now in response to moving the foot. Obviously it's twisting a little bit, but that's because we don't have full IK on the character, and that's where MotionBuilder comes in. But I can move the character's foot via the IK handle, and it's moving accordingly because the IK is connecting to the inner rig structure as well. And so the mesh is moving, the external mesh is moving in response. Once we've tested that an IK handle will move the mesh along with the rig, then we can take the IK handle off, because we won't need it, because as I said, we'll be using a full IK rig in MotionBuilder. The very last thing to do is to scale the character to the size that's required for MotionBuilder. So we go back now to the hypergraph, and we need to create a node between the mesh and the hierarchy of the rig. To do that, we create an empty group there, right click that, rename it scale, and then we take the hip node, place it under the scale node, and then we place the scale node under the mesh node. And that gives us a scale node there between the mesh and the hips, and it's the scale node that we scale. So I can close that down now. You'll see the scale node is at the bottom of the character's hierarchy. We go into perspective, make that window full. We can select our scale gizmo, and as we scale, both the mesh and the rig scale at the same rate. And generally you want to scale the character so that its feet are pretty well astride the base modelling plane of Maya. Keep on scaling it and so forth. Probably about there would do it. Smooth shade, and there we are. So that character now is rigged. We've tested it for IK, and we've scaled it using the method I've just shown you, having a scale node that's between the rig and the mesh. And now we can export it as an FBX file to be used in MotionBuilder.